that there's a much bigger world that's out there, a much larger landscape that we're going to be exploring as we delve into the blue hole. So on our live show this month, we played Dave the Diver, or I should say I played Dave the Diver. At the time, we got some first impressions over the first few hours of just the general framework of it. I have played it significantly more since then, really into it now, so I kind of have to keep going. But I think
Can't stop till you reach the bottom.
Can't stop till you reach the bot. I think what we were saying during our initial impressions when you asked me that night was that it has an interesting progression in terms of having like these different things that shake up the framework, where you're diving into the blue hole, and then you're going to the sushi restaurant and you're preparing the food from the fish that you catch in the blue hole. But something that I think drove me to continue was something very, very small that was indicative of how Dave the Diver is able to incentivize players to continue on. And it happens like right at the very beginning of the game. You dive in first time and you see some like sprinkly glowy things that you can pick up. And you go to pick those things up and there's a sea urchin. And you go to pick up the sea urchin and it hurts you. You get injured from it. You can't pick it up yet. And immediately my thought was, okay, there's going to be a point in time where you can pick up that sea urchin. And they're going to have to give you a piece of equipment, probably, in order to do that. And so immediately you're like, well, that's something that's going to be coming down the pike very soon. Soon after this, you start seeing little critters. I think you even said at one point, like, can you spear the little, like, shrimp or something that were around there? And you can't. You can't do that. And it's like, oh, but there's probably a point at which you get the ability to catch those little critters and in the water. And as you go through, you find out that these things that are kind of set up at the beginning as aspirational to get, they pay off on you. Because there is a point in the game where you get diving gloves that are used for other things, but you can also use them to pick up the sea urchins. And there is actually a quest line for somebody, which eventually leads you not just to, like, just a monetary reward, but to get a net. And when you get the net, you can go up to those little critters and you can catch them with the net instead. This is also true of when you're getting weapons and you're going, well, these weapons don't look like they're going to be very powerful later on. Well, of course, later on in the game, they tell you how to actually do that with upgrades. And so now you've collected different materials. You're probably trying to figure out why you're collecting copper and iron. Well, it's to upgrade different weapons in different ways, which you eventually learn later on. They also do a very smart thing with your phone, because you saw how we kept getting apps. Some of those apps actually lead to mini-games and management, where you hire people to make the sushi restaurant work better, which you start to realize you have to do, because Dave's not very fast when you get to the restaurant, and there's too many customers. You have, like, the Instagram app that they add in early on, where now you get likes, and that gives you new tiers that unlock other abilities down the road. They eventually give you a fish farm, where you can actually start raising fish from different depths, and you can collect them that way. An actual farm, so that you can raise vegetables, very Stardew Valley of them.
It shouldn't be Dave the Diver, it should be Dave the fucking entrepreneur.
Yes, it really should. But I think you start with the diver, so he still is a diver first, and then everything else later, because this is all in service, essentially, of making your sushi restaurant with the cleanest ingredients and everything like that.
This is Dave the... just a little $400 million tax thing for my dad.
I'm just a little guy. There's something that happens early on in the Blue Hole too, where you find these cooking pots and you find different ingredients, and you kind of go, oh, what's that about? Because they don't come up immediately, and those are things you can use to enhance and make better dishes. You know, they do something very smart, where there will be quests along the way. And you don't just get a money incentive for doing that. They have tangible rewards that actually expand the game and give you new equipment or abilities or, access to stuff that you previously didn't have. And they establish that very early so that people know that there's more to the game than you previously would have thought, like normally.
Well, I have a question for you on that note. Where you said it was kind of Stardew Valley-like when you get to that point.
Right.
A little bit. We're not going to say
very
it's like a perfect
light.
parallel.
It's very light, yes.
What do you think is a better model for that then? Where you've played a lot of Stardew Valley.
Couple hundred hours maybe, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of Stardew.
Yeah.
And to me, games like Stardew are very just kind of samey over time.
Okay.
Like, I feel like I have not played Stardew. It's not my type of thing.
Sure.
But I feel like you don't really get much in the way of upgrades and progression and gameplay expansion to it, right?
It was something that it had a problem with early on, and then eventually Concerned Ape had done more for late game content. I mean, the focus for Stardew Valley is always on the farm, but then they kind of expand out, like, the character stories, and you go to, fight in the mines and collect resources there. You go off to the desert. They have the island now that you can go to, the Mango Island.
They're all the same kind of gameplay loop, though, right?
A little bit. Yeah. Similar. Well, in the basic, like, I farm this, I water it, I get the crops, and I do stuff with it, and manufacture, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, Dave the Diver, you've said it starts out very simple and then gets a lot more complex.
Yes, it does.
With it, and a lot more additional things you can do and ways you can do things.
Oh, yes.
And how you can take the things that you're doing before and expand upon them. I prefer that type of thing because it means I'm not just stuck doing the same thing. It means I get to go, yes, I'm doing this thing and it's simple, and now I'm adding complexity and more options and different ways to do things.
Yes.
And all of that. Do you think that's a better formula for we're gonna just call it a Stardew Valley-like game?
Right. Yeah, I mean, Dave the Diver, I don't think meshes, with the formula as much, just because farming is a very light aspect that they add later on when they start getting to the vegetable. But if we're talking about cozy games as a general idea, I think Dave the Diver's formula works really well. I wouldn't necessarily say better, because I think that the gameplay loop for Stardew Valley and the way that they do day-night cycles and everything like that, the thing that Stardew Valley does that pushes you forward really well is that it really does start to become time management. You have a certain amount of time in the day, and you have a lot of things that you can do, so how am I going to organize my day? Dave the Diver doesn't really have timers like that. I
don't like timers. I don't like time management games.
Yeah, the way that they manage the pacing in Dave the Diver is you have a morning dive that you can do and an afternoon dive. Eventually, you learn how to do a night dive. But there's a trade-off, which I think is really interesting. If you can do one night dive a day, but a third of your time for that night is gone, so your time that you can have the sushi restaurant open is lessened. So you can't be open as long, so you can't make money on the restaurant and sell as much. But you just do that. You can do whatever you want up top, and then you have those dives, and then what you get to do when you're in there, you're pretty much limited by how long you can keep your oxygen up, and you can, store so much stuff in your pack. These are also things that can get upgraded over the course of the game, where you can get a larger tank, you can get a suit so you can dive further, you can get better storage space, you can even get a little sub that when you get those big, like the sharks and the tuna fish and stuff, you can actually have the little guy come down and pull the whole fish right out of the water, even if you just trank them. As long as you can stay down diving in the thing, your dive is continuing. So you can do whatever you want down there, and as long as you don't, die, which would be bad because you don't get to keep all but one of your ingredients, or you extricate yourself from it, that is the time period that you're in. And I thought that was a really good framework, because it kind of leaves the timing more in the hands of the player than it does with the game itself. So I like that, but mixing it up a lot in the game is very helpful. There's a lot of story areas. It feels like almost every time when I started to feel like it was starting to get into a cycle, where I was like, okay, I get what I'm doing. A new character comes in, or a new mission pops up, and it's not just that the mission is there, and it's like, hey, I can earn some money doing this thing. There's a whole new app that pops up. There's a whole new little aspect of the game that comes in. There's a whole new piece of equipment that unlocks, that allows you to access new areas. We learn about sea people. We learn about ancient civilizations. We learn about, all these new characters that, by helping them, unlock whole new areas of the game and all new different things that you can do. And by doing that, you're constantly feeling progression as you go along. Like, there's always something new around the corner, but setting that up really early on with these things that you can see you can't do right now is a really good way to jump into it. But then past that, it's constantly like, here's a VIP. They need something specific. Oh, well, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to have to learn how to do this thing. Therefore, we got to learn how to, we're going to have a tuna night. It's a big event. Check your email. Check your email. There's a tuna night happening in three days. Oh, no, I don't know how to do tuna fish. Well, good news. We're going to teach you how to, harvest tuna fish. And we're going to teach you about, steel nets that you could use and all of that good stuff. Oh, my net's too small to actually catch stuff with a net gun. Good news, we have upgrades so that you can, expand that out.
Bigger nets. Bigger net guns.
Yeah, I do.
Grenade launchers.
There is a grenade launcher, by the way. I hate. I know that you say that facetiously, but there is actually a grenade gun. You can modify it to be to put a trank field in place to put fish to sleep.
Right. I love grenaded fish.
Yeah, it's sleeping fish you can just collect immediately, and they're high grade because you didn't kill them. You can collect them
Perfect.
live, so that's fun.
What if they squirm out of my backpack?
That is not an aspect that they've expanded upon, I'm sorry. But what they do is that you collect those, and it goes to the fish farm, and then they can actually spawn, and you get more of them that can pop up if you get a couple of them in there. So that's fun. I'm raising sharks, so that's fun.
Great, your favorite.
My favorite. I've got big old tiger sharks in there, and mega mouths, and all sorts of fun stuff. There's boss.
All to eat them.
Yeah. There are boss battles in the game that I did not know about.
Not expect that.
Did not expect that. You get to deal with what is it? A wolf eel. You get to deal with the kraken. You get to. This is fun. You get to deal with a hermit crab that has a truck on its back because it's a giant
hermit crab.
Yeah, mantis shrimp that has boxing gloves. Fun stuff, folks.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's like Swan from Fallout 4.
It is kind of like Swan from Fallout 4. It's good.
Or the Myler Queen with the bus.
Yes. So yeah, it keeps giving you new things and incentivizes you to keep playing along the way because they're showing you stuff that's happening in the future that you can't do right now. And I think that's a really good way to incentivize early on. But then, once they get you enticed to play, because you're like, oh, I want to learn how to pick up those sea urchins, I want to learn how to catch those little critters, I really wish that these guns could get upgraded, oh man, if I could only raise fish, or, how do I get these vegetables that I need for certain dishes? Well, turns out there's a farm where you can actually grow crops. By doing that early, it leads you in, and then past that, you get the benefit of them constantly bringing in new mechanics before you even uncover that. You don't actually get, diving gloves so you can collect the sea urchins until, probably at least 10 hours into the game. And by that point, you've uncovered a lot of different mechanics that are also much more expandable and upgradable. And you learn how to do underwater farming and seahorse racing, because now I can collect seahorses, so we can race seahorses as a mini game. There's a little... I have not seen this yet, but they did tell me that occasionally you will find, I think they're pokefish or something, but they're definitely trying to... Fishmon, essentially, like, they're just unusual fish that are going to take more to capture, which is very much Pokemon related. There's a trading card game where you collect the different cards for fish that you've captured. They put, for some ungodly reason, a game where you can raise essentially a little Tamagotchi of a fish that's on your phone. It's just like everything in the kitchen sink, but they give it enough of a clip so that you're like, okay, these are expanding. The core gameplay is still the same, but it does shake things up a lot, where you're like, oh, we're really expanding continually to expand this game out, and the different places that you can go. One of the other things that's really interesting, too, in the fish farm, there's like 9 squares, and they're supposed to be for different depths, and you get night fishing opens up. The thing that's really incentivizing me now to continue playing, because it feels like I'm pretty far in, is that there are now still 4 of these squares that have nets over them that are not available yet. I don't know what they're for, but they're obviously for some other area I have not even uncovered yet. So what's that going to be? I don't know. I've increased my suit depth to its maximum, so I know it can't be further down. I've reached the sea floor, the blue hole, but it's got to be another region or other regions that I haven't even accessed yet. So now,
or a DLC.
Or a DLC. Maybe they're for those 2 DLCs I was talking about. They had a free DLC that was for Godzilla, and one that was a mashup with Dredge, so that you get like the weird like Cthulian Dredge characters. Maybe it's for those, but that would only account for like 2. There's got to be something else going on. So,
Now you have to find out.
Now I have to find out. So I'm gonna have to keep playing. I'm just going to be playing Dave the Diver for a while, folks, just in case you're wondering.
That's fine. That's how you do your game sometimes. I notice that when I'm like, oh, Nathan's over there still playing Dave the Diver.
Yeah, it's time.
3 days in a row.
It's time to go down my own game hole in the blue hole, essentially. But
I do that too, but not with the same games, so I get it.
No. You do that with, like, World of Warcraft, where you kind of...
yes and no.
Yeah.
I'll play that for a while, then I'll take a break. Like, right now I'm kind of on a break because of Space Marine 2.
Yeah,
I'm just like,
you're down the Space Marine 2. Yeah, you're down the Space Marine 2 hole.
I've already put like 45 hours into it.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, before I did Dave the Diver, the thing that I was down another hole on was the Surge, the first one, because I actually didn't really play the first Surge. So I was doing that for a long time. And then it's like, okay, I have to not now. Dave the Diver got me off of that onto a whole new thing. But anyway, I just really wanted to talk about the idea of early incentivization for players by alluding to things that are bigger, that then you start to realize the game is going to do setup and payoff on, and setup and payoff as just a general narrative structure is really important for good storytelling. And this does it contextually in terms of the mechanics of the game, where it sets up that these things are going to happen and it's going to get paid off later. It's actually sort of like what they do in Metroidvanias, where there will be areas you can see you can't access yet, but have the ability to access later if you go through the game and play it and unlock new abilities. So it's got that kind of aspect to it. And I think that's the reason why it works. It adds so many other things in the meantime that you're constantly like, I've expanded my repertoire. I've expanded what I can do. They had 2 spots for you to put charms in your inventory at the very beginning. I had no charms. Obviously, that was going to come up later. It's very early on where they incentivize that there's a much bigger world that's out there, a much larger landscape that we're going to be exploring as we delve into the blue hole. Then they pay that off by doing so, even when they first give you the phone there's like all these spots for apps that are currently locked. And you're like, well, they wouldn't have put them there unless you eventually unlock those. And I realized, like, this is not exclusive to Dave the Diver. It definitely isn't. I just think that it's very noticeable and it's very well implemented here. I've played a lot of games that have this, but I think this is a really good example of that kind of incentivization to get players to continue on and kind of like lead them into the gameplay that you want to present them with later. The only thing that I think we took criticism of that night was they do front load it, unfortunately, with a lot of storytelling before you get into the game itself. And having played a lot of it now, they could have really stretched that out over the course of stuff. Just get me into the water to start, and then we'll expand the storyline out. Do you typically notice the incentivization for players when you get into a game? When you start getting down like the game hole that you play, do you start to see like, oh, that's gonna come up later, that's gonna be a thing?
Sometimes it's pretty obvious. I know, like with Space Marine 2 as an example, for me it was like, oh, parts of these say they're locked and it's not available yet, or like weapons, I have to level up this class so I can get access to that weapon later on, or these armor parts later on. It's like, okay, so I see that where the progression is going for that.
Right.
Other examples, yeah, there's definitely times where a game will be like, oh, well, that feels like it's missing something, or feels like it might be more.
Mm-hmm.
And I do appreciate when it's done well.
Yeah.
When a game goes, yeah, there's going to be more here, don't you worry.
Right. You see it a lot with like the upgrade trees. That's actually a really good way in anything like from Diablo to Borderlands to anything like that. You'll see that there's an upgrade
Satisfactory.
Satisfactory.
Which is now in 1.0 now. Go get it.
It's only been out for... How many years has it been out for?
It's no longer in early access. It went to 1.0.
Yeah, but how long was
launch.
It in early access? Like 3
Couple years.
Yeah, something like that.
Couple years.
There are still some games that are still in early access after like 7 years. You're like, oh.
DayZ spent like 12 years in early access.
Yeah. I do find it a little bit jarring when I occasionally like see, hey, this game is out, and I'm like, hasn't it been out for like 5 years? Like, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? I've played this. I've finished it. What are you talking about?
Now there's more. Start from the beginning.
The formula that they did for Dave the Diver is probably one of the reasons why it got so many accolades, because it does a very good job of it. It gives you enough of a challenge with, and enough risk reward where you're kind of going in thinking to yourself like, oh, I could try and take on this big monster, but if I die, I'm not going to keep any of my stuff. But if I do, I can get a lot of nice resources to, get better sushi. It does a good job of incentivizing players to try new things, explore, and learn about some of the new systems. And it does it at a good enough clip that you're never really bored with the formula, so that you keep wanting to do that formula, but with new tools and new understanding of the formula. So, now that I've gotten a chance to play a lot more since the few hours that we spent with it on the live, I've really gotten addicted to it. So I'll report back if I learn that it's actually terrible. But I think I can firmly say that it is good. But then also that it does a really good gameplay progression strategy that I think is something worth implementing in more games, because it really draws you in very well.
For their second game, where you just play a farmer,
Dave the
Farmer
Farmer
goes fishing.
Yeah, the second game is Dave the Farmer, and the primary thing is farming, and occasionally you dive into like the pond that's out back to catch freshwater fish that you can use to fertilize the farm. And
pretty much.
Nice. Let's do that. Have fun. Mint Rocket. I think it's Mint Rocket that makes it. So what kind of incentivization mechanics do you like in games that have really drawn you in? Something that they put in early on that made you think that there's something in the very distant future that you were going to unlock that drove you forward into a game. Let us know in the comments down below. Progression systems are probably also part of that.
Yeah. Let us know what games do it well.
Yes. Or what games do it badly. If you do have an example
let us know what games do it so bad that you can't.
That you didn't want to play anymore. Let us know in the comments down below.